it normal for us to feel guilty about needing some space from our children?
Yes.
Sometimes I do catch myself and grab a moment and think, gosh, my breathing is so shallow. And I feel almost like I'm being chased by a bear.
Our bodies are reacting. You're in real danger right now, and it's really gearing us up with the same hormones that we are going to fight a bear, but actually we're just trying to get our kids to school. Feeling guilty doesn't actually mean you're doing something wrong. It just feels wrong because it's different. Kids are little mirrors of us. They show us what we are. There's a lot of conflict between the way we were brought up and what we believed was the right way and what we're learning is the right way. So adults are often learning at the same time as trying to parent their kids. Our body is just always activated. So it's about trying to take micro pauses in the day.
I was probably attributing to some of the meltdowns we were getting in the morning because my stress and anxiety I was putting onto them was constantly making them feel like they had to do everything in a rush.
When you have a kid, your world just becomes about them, and then all of a sudden years have passed and you don't really know who you are anymore. Sometimes you go through a bit of a grieving process of who you were because life isn't the same again.
I'm thrilled to welcome Jo Rodriguez to Parent Unplugged. Jo is a health psychologist behind the Instagram space Straightforward Psychology, 63,000 followers, where she supports overwhelmed, exhausted adults to feel less shit. She shares simple, practical ways to calm stress, ease anxiety, and step out of survival mode. In this episode, we'll zero in on the messy terrain where parenting and mental health collide, when you feel triggered by your child, when your own stress baseline is running high, and how to find your footing again, not just for your kids, but for you. Jo, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Jo, would you start off by telling the listeners today a little bit about how you got into helping people with stress and burnout?
So I've always worked in mental health since my undergraduate degree, and I've taken an unusual route to get where I am, but I've worked in the NHS, I've worked in private practice, I've worked in universities. It's just something that I've always loved doing, and so I've always made sure that I move through my career doing what I love, and it's ended me up here.
Lovely. Well, it's nice to work in a field that you enjoy, for sure. What do kids do that trigger us so much? Why do they push our buttons more than anybody else?
Kids are little mirrors of us, really, aren't they? They show us what we are, and especially our own children. They reflect who we are, and because we care so much about wanting them to grow up to be, well-rounded little humans, and we love them so much, we try so hard to get it right. But actually, sometimes that makes us feel really stressed and really overwhelmed. Being parents a challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're so right. I think we'll have that innate want, don't we, to kind of get it right, so-called right with our children.
Yeah.
And that can feel like a lot of pressure at times that we put on ourselves, I think, especially for mothers.
Yeah.
And I think we all need to kind of adopt more of this good enough approach in parenting, don't we? But it's kind of a new concept that we're hearing a lot more about, and it doesn't necessarily come naturally to many of us.
We're just so overwhelmed with information, and we know we have access to so many different ways to be a parent, what we think is the right thing to do. And then, but then often our upbringing is very different. So there's a lot of conflict between the way we were brought up and what we believed was the right way and what we're learning is the right way. So adults are often learning at the same time as trying to parent their kids.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you see a lot of that nowadays, don't we? That we're perhaps trying a new parenting style than perhaps the way that we were raised.
Yeah.
And therefore it doesn't naturally come to us that way. We're having to be very consciously aware as to what we say. And it's hard to be consciously aware all the time because as human beings, we're busy, we're distracted, we are reactive in the moment. We do get triggered before we sometimes even realise that it's happened.
Yeah.
So to kind of be consciously aware, to make changes to our behaviour and our natural blueprint of the way that we were raised is really tricky.
As well as, trying to regulate our own nervous system and be calm throughout when we are constantly being triggered. And like you said, and we're learning, it's just, it's hard.
So when we're feeling stressed or anxious, you talk a lot on your Instagram about calming down the body first when we feel stressed or anxious. Can you talk us through what you mean by that?
My background as a health psychologist, I've always integrated mind and body. So it's not just about working on your mind when you're stressed. It's about working on your whole system because how we feel is intrinsically part of how we think. So we often see through the lens of our emotions. If we're anxious, we tend to have more anxious thoughts. If we're down, we tend to think everything is a bit more bleak. But if we can bring our body into a place of safety and feeling calm, then that really helps us to see things more clearly, have more rationality. So what I mean by that is just learning to bring our body to a place of safety. So a place where we're not constantly triggered into fight, flight or freeze.
That's interesting. How can we learn to do that? Can you give us some examples?
The way that we're triggered and the way that our body reacts really depends on like quite a lot of factors. So experiences that happen to us in adulthood, experiences that happen to us in childhood, genetically how we're made as well. But there are certain things that we can do, certainly, that help us teach our body, if you like, that we don't need to be triggered all the time. So because we're so busy all the time, because life is so stressful, our system is like really overloaded. Because it's so overloaded, we are in too much of a state of stress and not enough in a state of safety or calm.
Right.
So teaching our body to come into safety is about trying to reduce overwhelm, teach our body that, you know, just because I've got 10,000 things to do, that doesn't actually mean I'm in danger or there's a threat to me, even though that is actually how our body responds. There's loads of different ways of doing it. And really, it's about finding a method that works for you. But generally, I think with busy people, it's about first of all noticing what is our body doing. And I think often, you know, it starts off with ignoring the fact that we need a pee, you know, skipping lunch or just always eating on the fly, never sitting down to do anything and pausing. Just constantly moving. So our body is just always activated. So it's about trying to take micro pauses in the day, trying to sort of sit down and think, how is my body feeling right now? What do I need? Breathing techniques are a great way of doing it if you're not too anxious. Sometimes breathing techniques can trigger a bit of anxiety. The typical ways like meditation, tapping techniques, but it really starts with noticing and pausing.
Okay. It's really interesting you say that, actually, because I do sometimes clock myself acting like that as a parent, that I will be in that morning rush, trying to get everyone where they need to go, making sure we've got the kit, making sure we've got snacks, water bottles. And I will find myself running up the stairs. I run back down the stairs. You know, I spend all morning thinking I need the toilet, but don't get a chance to go. And sometimes I do catch myself and grab a moment and think, gosh, my breathing is so shallow. And I feel like, you know, almost like I'm being chased by a bear.
Yeah, exactly. But that is exactly what our bodies haven't evolved as quickly as our society has. So our bodies are reacting like that you're in real danger right now, and it's really gearing us up with the same hormones that we are going to fight a bear, but actually we're just trying to get our kids to school and out the door without losing it.
Absolutely. And I think energy is quite infectious, isn't it? And I have to really remind myself of that I just kind of see it in my head that I'm trying to get everything done and I've got more things to do than the time that I have. But I also have to remind myself, if I want the kids to calm down and maybe be a bit more proactive in this situation, maybe I need to calm down and take that breath first.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly it. Because without meaning to, we just ramp up the stress, and the kids feel that. They feel when you're rushing around, when you're, you know, maybe you're just a tiny bit shorter with them or a tiny bit more like rushing, like hurrying them along, and then they feel that and they get a bit more resistant, or they start to feel stressed too without really knowing why. Yeah. But if we can pause and slow down, even if we feel stressed, it really does pay off. I would use this morning as an example, really rushing to get here and rushing to get out the door and knowing I didn't want to be late, but I know that if I stress my kids, they already don't want to go to school. Yeah. They won't want to leave the house. They'll start to get angry. And then that makes me more stressed. And you just get in this really downwards vicious cycle that ends up making you feel really crappy as a parent. Yeah. You're really stressed. They're really stressed. And then you kind of feel like, whereas if we can just breathe, it's okay. The more calm I am, the more positive I am, the more that they will feel that and they will feel okay and safe. Yeah. It just goes so much more smoothly.
I remember reading a couple of years ago about how we can be a trigger of anxiety in our children by always hurrying them. And I was really guilty of that at the time. I don't think I said anything to my children in the morning that didn't have the words afterwards, quickly. Can you get your shoes on quickly? Can you get to the toilet quickly? Can you get in the car quickly? Hurry up. Because I was always trying to usher them along. And in my head, I was thinking, but they've got no sense of urgency. They need to understand that they need to get to school on time. And when I really stopped and analysed that, I realised that I was probably attributing to some of the meltdowns we were getting in the morning because my stress and anxiety I was putting onto them with constantly making them feel like they had to do everything in a rush. You know, they were learning to put their shoes on, learning to pack their school bags. They didn't need to do it in such a hurry. And one of the big things that I found actually helped me was to play music. But not music that was too sort of pumped up. A more calming vibe actually gave me a bit more of a calming vibe. That yes, we needed to get stuff done, but it wasn't necessarily in such a hurry. You know, if we were a couple of minutes late or we skipped reading that day, that mattered less than this constant pressure I was putting on all of us in the household.
And I came to the same realisation too. And I think people assume that when you're a psychologist, you know it all, but you don't. And when you've got kids, you realise how little you know, because it's so different when they're your own kids and when you're living in that experience. And so I went through the same thing. You know, my kids have quite a lot of sensory needs, and I had one child that was just struggling, and I was just so stressed to get him to school that actually it was just making everything so much worse until one day just like, I can't do this anymore, have to completely stop, have to just completely take my foot off the gas. And it really changed everything so significantly. But I just don't think we realise it, because we're trying to do the right thing, right? We're trying to do the right thing by getting them in on time, by doing all of these things. Yeah. But actually, by doing all of these things, we're feeling stressed, they're feeling stressed, and then ultimately, is it the right thing?
One thing what we know we should be doing, what I'm learning in life is actually applying that is one of the biggest challenges, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
Just because you're a psychologist, I totally get that. Actually applying it in your own household with your own children is a completely different ballgame.
There's always a nagging thing in your head of what you're not doing, or should I be doing that? Is that the right thing? And you only really realise a few years down the line, maybe looking back, and then, okay, that was okay. You know, things are working out, but, you know, it's hard.
And it's hard to reflect in the moment. I often find I'll reflect in the evening on how the day went and a sequence of events. And that's when I'll really critique what went right and what went wrong, or could have been done differently to get a better outcome. And it's only by kind of living those things through in my head that I think, okay, maybe I do need to try something tomorrow. But in the moment, it's much harder to recognise that.
Yeah. And that's what I mean when I say we see through the emotions. So when we're stressed, our rational thinking brain goes into a low power mode, because our body is just gearing us up with the energy to move. So we're not really thinking in the same way as when we're calm.
Yeah.
So that's why trying to get your body into that place, even if it's just down a notch, don't have to be super zen, but just down a notch, our rational brain just has more of a chance to be working, so that then we have that ability to think, right, actually, what is important right now? What can I do that's going to help?
So lots of parents say they've lost themselves since having kids. What can we do to find ourselves again?
It's hard, isn't it? It's so hard, because when you have a kid, like, your world just becomes about them, and then all of a sudden, you know, years have passed and you don't really know who you are anymore. I think it does come down to a similar thing of just starting to think, what feels important for me and them, you know, because we hear it all the time. You can't pour from an empty cup. You have to look after yourself to look after them. But I think it's when you're a parent, it's really hard to do, isn't it? Because you just want to do the right thing. And it does come with a lot of guilt often if you do try and do something for yourself. So I think it starts with just doing small things, you know, thinking about small things that give you joy, small things that interest you, and taking small pockets of time for that, and maybe trying to build momentum. And if you feel guilty, recognise that feeling guilty doesn't actually mean you're doing something wrong. It just feels wrong because it's different.
And I guess sometimes it can feel wrong for us because it's not necessarily the way that we were raised, can it? So we're kind of breaking those generational patterns, and that can feel a little bit alien to us to start with.
Yeah, it can. It can feel really uncomfortable and really awkward. But when we keep doing it, we realise the kids notice when mummy's happier, you know, the kids notice that they get interested in what you're interested in. They're curious. Just because you're doing these things and trying to get back to you, that doesn't mean that they're going to lose their mum. If anything, they might get a better version of their parent.
Yeah. And I think it takes time, doesn't it? I think we've all got this sense of urgency to, you know, have a baby and be ourselves again within months and bounce back, as the saying is. And I think we do need just time, a couple of years really, for a woman's body to get back to normal, to feel herself emotionally, to maybe get that little bit more time, because children are all consuming, certainly in the early days, to be able to recognise what it is that you need and want.
I remember saying it to a friend of mine not that long ago, actually. I feel like it took me about 8 years. You know, I had 3 kids, and I feel like it took me about 8 years until my brain started registering that I want to do something else, like it had capacity for something else, because I think you just live in a very sleep-deprived bubble, don't you, for such a long time. Your body's not really yours. Everything feels different, and it just slowly starts to come back. Personally, I just noticed that I just had more of a desire to do things for me, and I think that's often a sign of, you know, when maybe the transition is happening from being all in, just that's all you do, to maybe I want to find me again.
For me, I love that. And I agree with that. I think it took me years, I would say around the same sort of time frame, to even want to consider something else. But I think it was also having an acceptance. Life had changed for good and I kind of have a new way of thinking and functioning.
Yeah.
And it's not going to go back to the old way, because there's a part of my brain that will always be making sure that my kids are okay, making sure that they've got what they need, thinking about them if they're at school with a cold, are they going to be okay today? That little bit of worry, that little bit of concern, it never leaves you as a parent. So you do kind of have to adjust to the new way of thinking.
Sometimes you go through almost a bit of a grieving process, don't you, for who you were, because life isn't the same again. It is always different. The person that you are, I think sometimes as well, that can come with a bit of friction. If we desperately try to keep the life that we had pre-kids with kids, I think that adds a lot more stress and a lot more overwhelm, because yes, you can adapt your life and it doesn't have to completely change, but fundamentally things do change because there's another person. It's hard to try and get the balance right, and what works for one person might not work for another. I think sometimes just trying to give up the struggle also can help, to try and stop that pulling of who I was and who I am, and that's a process in itself.
Absolutely. So how do we know as a parent if we're just tired or when we're actually burnt out?
Burnout is when we've been pushing too hard for too long. Everybody needs a bit of stress in their lives. It's natural, it's normal. Humans are designed to have stress. But what we're not designed for is continual stress without rest, which is what a lot of people are doing right now. And burnout is when we've had too much stress with too little rest for too long. And our body is just completely depleted. Usually it starts off with, colds more frequently, just feeling ill, feeling run down, feeling tired no matter how much sleep you get. Your mood is dropping and you're doing the things you used to do, but you're not enjoying it anymore. Maybe it comes with a bit more anxiety. And there's just constant sort of low-level fatigue that's always there. And it doesn't get better with rest. That's usually the sign. The thing with burnout is it's kind of banded around quite a lot, burnout. So people almost dismiss when they're that tired and they're like, oh, I just need a holiday. I just need a weekend. But with burnout, what typically happens is you have those things, but you still feel exhausted. Burnout actually takes quite a long time to recover from.
Which is a tricky one, isn't it? Because I think it plays into that psyche as a parent, especially with women, that, we should be doing more. Why can't we handle more? We all have this self-dialogue where we expect a lot of ourselves rather than realising that, I think it was Anna Martha that actually said it to me about treating ourselves as the additional child and making sure our needs are actually met too, so that we're able to show up for everyone else as the parent that we want to be and the parent they deserve. And I think that's a really fabulous way of looking at it, because otherwise we can end up taking care of everybody else's needs and feeling like we're almost not worthy of taking care of ourselves too. Can you give us some simple ways to calm down our own nervous system when we are feeling overwhelmed?
You start with noticing, pausing, micro moments, micro pauses. And I think that has to be the number one way when you're super busy, because I get a lot of parents coming to me saying, I just don't have the time. Literally 30 seconds, 60 seconds, checking in. So it could be that you just sit down, you just put your hands here on your heart, and you just simply breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. Just that brings a sense of a moment of calm, safety in the body. And that's what the body needs. So regulation is not always being calm. Regulation is being able to move through the states and bring the body back to a place where it feels safe. So it's not anxious or down or shut off. Micro moments of pausing, breaths with the extended breath out, extended exhale, that slows your heart rate down. That really brings your system into a place of calm. I love tapping. I do quite a lot of tapping, EFT tapping.
Can you talk us through that quickly?
Yeah, so EFT tapping is tapping on set acupressure points. The clinical research into it is relatively new, but tapping has been around for decades. It's been used in Chinese medicine, but it's only in recent years that it's coming more mainstream because there's academic backing behind it that are starting to show how it works. It's believed at the moment that by tapping on set acupressure points whilst you're stressed or whilst you're thinking about something that stresses you, what it does is it sends a message to the stress region in your brain, the amygdala and the other areas associated, that says actually all is calm. It's really fascinating how it works. So what I typically do is pick one or two acupressure points. So you have the side of your hand, you have inside eyebrow, outside eyebrow, under your eye, under your nose, under your lips, collarbone, under your arm, and on the top of your head. So what I tend to do though is just pick one. So the collarbone is quite a good one, and it's quite discreet. And if you're in your car and you don't want to do all of it, so just tapping on your collarbone when you feel quite stressed helps to lower the stress in the body.
That's incredible, and a nice easy one you can do in the moment.
Is amazing how effective it is. I use it on my kids as well. So my kids have quite a lot of anxiety. And now they ask me, they're like, if they feel stressed at bedtime, they say, Mummy, can you tap me?
Wow, I love that.
And it just really, and it helps them sleep. And it's so effective.
Because, I mean, that's a really valid point. A lot of these techniques aren't just for us, are they?
No.
We want to be teaching them to our children as coping mechanisms as they ride through childhood and into adulthood as well.
Yeah, exactly. So my eldest especially has a lot of anxiety around sleep and falling asleep. And when he's starting to escalate or panic, he says, can we tap? Helps him to feel calmer. Yeah.
That's incredible. I love that. So is it normal for us to feel guilty about needing some space from our children?
Yes. In a word, yes. Yeah, because we feel like we're doing something wrong because we're not completely focusing on them. It doesn't feel right, does it? It takes a learning, relearning, reparenting ourselves to recognise it's not selfish, it's okay. It's not all about us either. It's just about making it even.
Yeah, allowing some space for ourselves as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So why does parenting bring out so much anxiety in us?
Because we want to get it right.
Yeah.
Because we care. And because we have access to so much information about how to get it right. And a lot of that information is contradictory. And so it feels quite overwhelming. Comparison as well, comparison to what we see other parents doing, social media, the amount of information available to us is overwhelming. No matter what we do, we can always have a sense that we're not doing it quite right.
Yeah.
And I think that's really hard for parents.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's wonderful, this world that we're living in, that we do have so much information. And there are times I think I genuinely draw on that.
Yeah.
And it has been really beneficial.
Yeah.
There have been other times when it's made me question myself.
Yeah.
It's made me feel guilty.
Yeah.
Felt like I'm not enough as a mother. So it can be a double-edged sword, can't it?
Absolutely.
And it's hard to know how to judge that and not be overwhelmed by it, especially as maybe first-time mothers.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great source of support. It's a great source of, getting to know people and networking. But equally, it's a great source of how to feel bad, because people show their highlight reel often. They don't show the reality behind the scenes. So if we're feeling bad and we look at someone else's highlight reel and think they've got it all together, that instantly makes us feel bad.
One that always gets me actually is the posts around how much time we've got left and to hang on to those moments, like you've only got so many summers or things like this, and about being present.
Yeah.
Because I'll sit there and feel an overwhelmed sense of guilt that I've not treasured every moment. And I really have to remind myself it's physically impossible to be present every second of the day and to be in awe of my children every second of every day.
Yeah.
But when I see those posts, I'll feel bad for the fact that they were just annoying me at breakfast and I wasn't present and I didn't care in that moment. I just wanted to lock myself in the bathroom and be left alone.
Exactly.
And everybody gets to me.
I know, it's so bad, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're just like, I'm just in that moment though.
Exactly. In that moment, it was sheer desperation. I couldn't find presence in me. I couldn't reframe. I just needed some time out.
Yeah. And that's okay too, isn't it?
Why do parents feel guilty for putting their own needs first? And how can we try and get past that?
I think we feel guilty because we're not used to it. And it's not a narrative that I think is commonplace. We feel like it should be children first. It doesn't have to be that way. And actually, if you tend to your own needs, if you're looking after yourself, you're able to look after your kids in a way that maybe you would feel better about eventually. Start with small moments of what interests me, what do I enjoy? Are there things that I've stopped doing that I really love doing that I might be able to get back into? Are there new things that I'm interested in that I think I'd love to try it? But nothing in a big way, just starting off with curiosity. I think being curious with yourself, being curious with what you want, what feels important, what feels missing, and recognizing that it's okay to do new things and it's okay to do these things whilst feeling guilty.
Yeah.
Because the feeling of guilt will subside. Once we recognize actually it feels good to do that, everyone benefits when I do it, it's not selfish. You can always compare up, but you can always compare down, and I think we have a tendency to compare ourselves down to other people. And it's just trying to recognize like you're only on your own path. You're only in your own journey. You can't compare.
Yeah.
There's no point. If you care, then you're doing a good job. If you're doing the best that you can.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel like you've given us lots of brilliant advice and tips. I really like the idea of tapping and some of the breathing techniques you've given us there. And understanding the difference between tiredness and burnout, I think, is a big thing for parents to be looking out for and really trying to release that guilt. So thank you. I feel there's lots of words of wisdom. Thanks, Jo.
Thank you.